Isabella sat secluded in a cozy corner of the restaurant, lost in her thoughts, occasionally glancing out the window. Beyond its confines, across the lively street, she spotted Alexander, her husband, standing with a bouquet of flowers in hand. Surprise washed over her, as he was supposed to be tied up in an important business meeting with partners. Memories started to flood Isabella's mind, and she tried to recall the last time he had given her flowers. Just as she was sinking into her reflections, a young, slender brunette with a radiant, model-like beauty approached Alexander. They shared a passionate kiss, after which Alexander tenderly wrapped his arm around her waist, and together they walked off along the street, chatting merrily. Isabella felt a surge of rage. She wanted to stand up and run after them, but managed to restrain herself in time. After all, she was expecting very important guests from abroad, an event she had been planning for a long time. She had to suppress her emotions, though everything inside her was boiling and seemed to be shrouded in fog. The attendance at these funerals was limited, yet to a bystander, they could have appeared opulent. The lavish oak casket, elegantly attired mourners, and high-end vehicles parked outside the cemetery's entrance all suggested that the departed had been well off. Indeed, this was true. The ceremonies were held for Isabella Harrison, a notable figure who owned a large construction firm, 2 beauty parlors, a trendy magazine, and was known for her philanthropy and remarkable character. We gathered to pay our respects to someone who had greatly impacted the city's growth. A man dressed in a suit as expensive as an average person's 6-month budget started his tribute with a sorrowful look. A vibrant, successful, and attractive woman had left us. Whispers could be heard from every corner. Such a tragedy. She was so youthful. Indeed, merely 35. Had she only had more time, she was truly exceptional. The deep, pitch-black void before her gradually began to lift. Eventually, it transformed into the distinct kind of darkness one experiences with closed eyes. The initial sound that reached her ears was a solemn chant. "Grant eternal rest, O Lord, to thy servant, thy handmaiden Isabella." This melody, typical of priests during rituals, and particularly at funerals, enveloped her. She could hear murmurs and weeping nearby, feeling eerily as though she was in an alternate dimension, when suddenly a wave of fear overwhelmed her. But why this fear, and where was she? The lapse in time before she recognized her mother's lament was unclear. "My dear Bella, whom have you left behind? I shall never meet my grandchildren." It was as though she was an observer at her own memorial, Isabella mused distantly, opening her eyes. The realization that it was indeed her own funeral sent a shiver of dread through her. This overwhelming fear jolted her back to awareness. "Why am I in a coffin, about to be buried?" Isabella pondered. "Is this merely a terrible nightmare?" Yet, even in her dazed state, the reality of her situation became increasingly clear. Here she was, a distinguished entrepreneur and benefactor, lying within a casket, surrounded by mourners. She yearned to leap up and declare her vitality, but all she could manage was a faint flutter of her eyelids. It dawned on Isabella that perhaps revealing herself prematurely might not be the best course of action, considering the circumstances likely had a deeper cause. With a determined effort, she cast a glance to the side and caught sight of her husband's lover, discreetly filming the funeral on her smartphone. Isabella was tempted to confront the deceitful interloper with words sharp enough to cut her down, and she was more than capable of it. However, she pondered, why disgrace herself when there would be time for reckoning later? Such are the twists of destiny that allowed the betrayer to escape with merely a scare this time. After all, Isabella had long harbored suspicions about Alexander's loyalty. The situation was classic. Her husband often came home late, his shirt collar smeared with unmistakable traces of bright red lipstick, accompanied by those late-night business calls. Isabella might have chosen to overlook it. Affairs were hardly uncommon. He wouldn't be the first man to stray, nor the last. He could indulge his whims, and then return to domestic life as if nothing had happened. But the audacity displayed at the restaurant crossed a line. Their brazen disregard for discretion was the final breach of respect. That evening, Isabella resolved to confront the issue head-on, yet she never got the chance. Something unexpected occurred. But what exactly? Was this the reason she found herself awakening in a coffin? At that moment, her eyes locked with the priest's, or rather the priest caught a glimpse of her from the corner of his eye. A brief spark of panic appeared in his gaze, but he quickly regained his composure. Impressively, he gave no indication of having noticed anything amiss. The priest was relatively young. Not a boy, certainly, but not the stereotypical elder clergyman either. Perhaps he had pieced it all together, Isabella hoped. That would be ideal. Her primary concern now was to subtly communicate that he should keep her secret. Father Michael pondered whether he had hallucinated the sight of the supposedly deceased opening her eyes. Determined to confirm his sanity, he watched closely, only to be shocked when she indeed opened her eyes briefly before closing them once more. "She seems to be signaling me to keep quiet," the priest surmised. Strikingly, the husband was absent from the funeral, a detail that raised eyebrows. Compounding the oddity was a woman, shamelessly filming the entire ceremony on her phone. It seemed plausible that she, along with Isabella's husband, had plotted to eliminate her to inherit her wealth. Father Michael held Mrs. Harrison, who had adopted her husband's surname, in high regard. She was known for her generosity at the church, often bringing donations of clothing, food, medicine, and substantial sums of money. Isabella's philanthropy was heartfelt, not merely a social obligation, setting her apart from many affluent individuals. Her kindness had made a significant impact. Learning he would officiate the service for such an esteemed individual, Father Michael, also known as Michael Thompson outside the church, felt honored. "Fear not, servant of God, your secret is safe with me," he silently assured. In a discreet gesture, he reached out to gently squeeze her hand, offering solace. Isabella's sigh of relief was palpable. The scant attendance hinted at a funeral arranged in haste, possibly to ensure the burial proceeded swiftly, precluding any chance of her regaining consciousness. Emily Anderson, Isabella's mother, was the sole figure of genuine grief, observing her daughter's coffin with a distant gaze. Unlike the observant priest, she perceived no unusual signs and was lost in her thoughts. During her junior year in college, Isabella faced the loss of her father, John Anderson, who left behind a modest construction business. Emily, her mother, was at a loss regarding the company's future. "I'll complete my education and take over the business," Isabella, the eldest sibling, asserted confidently. Her younger brother was still in high school at the time. "But what about the business in the meantime?" Emily worried. "What do you mean?" Isabella was taken aback. "Why not consider Uncle Andrew?" Uncle Andrew was not only John's closest friend, but also the godfather to John's children. "He'll manage the business and guide me," Isabella declared with such conviction that it brought a smile to Emily's face. Such optimism and determination often seem boundless in youth. Isabella turned her vision into reality. She pursued a degree in economics and business, dedicating her time after lectures to learning the business ropes under her godfather's mentorship. Upon graduation, she confidently stepped into the role of leading the company. Initially, the staff was skeptical about this young newcomer, but Isabella's competence soon won them over. The business flourished under her leadership, becoming a prominent construction firm in the area. "Your father would have been so proud," Emily often remarked, as Isabella expanded her ventures to include beauty salons and a fashion magazine, and later, her marriage. From the beginning, Emily was skeptical about Isabella's choice in Alexander Harrison for a husband. His pompous demeanor and evasiveness were off-putting to her, yet she respected her daughter's choice. Victoria, engaged in an affair with Alexander, discreetly filmed the funeral service, then concealed her phone in her sleek black patent leather handbag. She paused her recording, finding the sight of the coffin's descent too grim to capture. Emily Anderson, overcome by grief, was gently led to a waiting car. As the ceremony concluded, the crowd thinned, leaving only the funeral workers ready with their tools. "Wait just a moment, lads," Father Michael called out to them. The workers, visibly annoyed, held back as instructed. To their astonishment, the priest then climbed into the grave, opened the coffin, and extended his hand to Isabella. With his timely support, Isabella emerged from the coffin, nearly collapsing in the process. "What are you doing standing there?" she demanded of the workers. "Give us a hand." Rallying, two of the workers assisted them out of the grave. One, bewildered, inquired, "What just happened?" "That, my boys, was a miracle akin to rising from the dead," Father Michael explained with gravity, exchanging significant glances with them. "Let's keep this among ourselves." The workers were dumbstruck, their eyes wide as they looked on at the priest and the entrepreneur. Speechless, they nodded in silent agreement. "Enough dawdling, back to work," Father Michael urged, then steadied Isabella, guiding her towards his vehicle. The events at that funeral were certainly out of the ordinary, Father Michael reflected. It's not common for the deceased to make such a startling comeback. As they arrived at his vehicle, Isabella was overcome with queasiness. "Are you feeling any better?" he inquired, handing her a paper towel and some water. "Somewhat," she managed to reply, her voice weak. The priest helped Isabella into the rear seat of his vehicle, examining her with concern. "It looks like you've been poisoned," he concluded. Isabella, deep in thought, acknowledged his statement, suspecting Alexander's involvement. "You'll need a change of clothes," noted Father Michael. "Yes, I do," she agreed, her mind foggy with fatigue. More than anything, she longed for a restful sleep in a comfortable bed, away from the confines of her funeral garments. "But where will we find clothes at this hour?" she wondered aloud, barely stifling a yawn. "Don't worry about that," the priest reassured her with a smile. "The church receives plenty of clothing donations from generous souls. They're at your disposal, if you're not too particular." "Choosing isn't really an option for me at the moment," she admitted, battling another bout of nausea. 4. The wave of nausea grew stronger. Isabella, feeling another surge, requested Father Michael to pull over. "That's a good sign," he remarked, pleased. "It shows your body's resilience. You're not one to give up easily." "Enough with the old sayings," Isabella managed a weak smile. "Without your help, I might have actually been buried and forgotten for good. That's behind us now. The important thing is you're alive. We'll take care of the rest." Upon reaching the church, Father Michael assisted a still shaky Isabella from the car, advising, "Lean on me for support." She did as told. "Ladies, no need for alarm," Father Michael announced as they entered, calming the startled onlookers, who instinctively made the sign of the cross at the sight of Isabella. "She's very much alive," he clarified, explaining the day's extraordinary events. After serving some warm, fragrant tea, Isabella began to feel somewhat better. Father Michael then requested the church staff to find some clothing for her. Dressed in a light, flowery cotton dress and comfortable beige ballet flats, Isabella felt a newfound ease. "This is quite a refreshing change," she thought, admiring her reflection. "Being alive has its perks, but what's the next step? Returning home isn't an option right now, though I'd love to see the look on Alexander's face." Thoughts of her mother brought a pang of sorrow. Isabella hoped fervently she'd be able to reassure her mother of her well-being soon. "You look wonderful," Father Michael complimented, approving of Isabella's transformation. "We'll head to my place for you to get some proper rest, and then we can plan your next steps," Father Michael suggested. "Would that be all right with you?" Isabella inquired, concerned about the imposition. "Absolutely, it's no trouble at all," he reassured her. Arriving at his home, he welcomed her warmly. "Here we are. Make yourself at home." Father Michael's residence was a spacious, well-built wooden house, not far from the church. Upon entering, they were greeted by a young girl around 12 or 13. "This is Ava, my daughter," he introduced her with a fond look. "She's quite the caretaker and invaluable support to her mother," he added proudly. "How many children do you have?" Isabella asked, smiling at the warm family scene. "3," replied Father Michael. His wife, unlike those at the church, showed no sign of shock. She seemed to be privy to the day's extraordinary events. "Welcome back to the world of the living," said Father Michael's wife with a light-hearted tone. "I'm Elizabeth, and it seems you already know who you are. Let's formally meet." "Pleased to meet you," Isabella responded. "The pleasure is mine," Elizabeth affirmed. "Now come, let's have something to eat." The Thompson family consisted of Ava, the eldest at 14, twin boys at 11, and the youngest, who was just 5 years old little girl. As the family gathered for dinner, each member, including little one, said grace before eating. "I'm not really familiar with praying," Isabella admitted, feeling a bit awkward. "No need to worry about that," Father Michael responded warmly. "It's more respectable to be open about not knowing than to feign devoutness." The dinner, particularly the pearl barley porridge with diced chicken patties, was exceptional. The freshness of the cucumber, tomato, radish and herb salad impressed Isabella more than any fine dining experience. As Elizabeth and Ava busied themselves setting up for tea, Isabella complimented, "The cooking here is fantastic, Father Michael." "Please call me Michael here," he corrected with a smile. "Understood," she acknowledged. "Michael, your wife's cooking is remarkable, and your family is truly lovely." "I appreciate your kind words," he replied. For dessert, Elizabeth presented coffee cream-filled sponge cakes. "These are divine," Isabella praised, savoring the taste. Elizabeth's smile showed her delight at the praise. Later, Michael excused himself for church duties. Seeing Isabella's fatigue, Elizabeth inquired, "Ready for some rest?" "Yes," Isabella agreed, feeling drowsy from the meal and the day's events. "Follow me," Elizabeth offered. "I'll prepare a guest room for you." "That would be wonderful, thank you." The guest room was spacious, well lit and inviting, a fact Isabella gratefully acknowledged to Elizabeth. "I'm glad it's to your liking," Elizabeth responded. Isabella drifted off to sleep in the late afternoon, finding much-needed rest in the comfort of the Thompson home. Michael hadn't returned yet. "It seems even priests can be delayed by their duties," Elizabeth commented casually, prompting Isabella to think of her own husband's late nights. She quickly dismissed the thought, "It's unfair to even compare Michael, who's so genuine, to him." "Mrs. Harrison," Elizabeth called. "Please, just Isabella," she responded with a smile. "How about some tea, Isabella?" offered Elizabeth. "That would be wonderful," Isabella agreed, and they made their way to the terrace. As Isabella admired the garden, she inquired, "Who's responsible for this stunning garden?" "That would be me," Elizabeth proudly stated. Surprised, Isabella, who had visited many affluent homes, had never seen such an enchanting garden. "Incredible," she praised. "You have a real talent for this. It's unlike anything I've seen before, and I've seen quite a bit. You could easily make this your profession." Elizabeth responded with a smile. "I appreciate that. However, it wasn't just my doing. Ava played a big part in this as well. She's really passionate about garden design." "She's incredibly gifted," Isabella remarked appreciatively. "Thank you, Isabella. Michael has always spoken very highly of you, too. It's truly an honor to meet someone as distinguished as yourself," Elizabeth responded. "Me remarkable?" "Hardly," Isabella demurred with a smile. "Michael, on the other hand, has truly made a difference. He seems to have found his true vocation in the priesthood." Noticing a brief shadow cross Elizabeth's expression, Isabella expressed concern. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, it's fine," Elizabeth reassured her quickly. "It's just that Sasha had a different life before he took up the priesthood. He was a doctor." Isabella treaded lightly. What led to the change? Elizabeth then recounted Michael's past as a skilled surgeon, known for saving lives against the odds. People trusted him implicitly, placing him on a pedestal despite his humanity. However, a turning point came with a patient beyond saving, a situation Michael faced with heavy heart, knowing the inevitability of the outcome. Despite his best efforts, the patient didn't survive the surgery. The toughest moment for Michael was breaking the news to the family, Elizabeth remembered. The weight of perceived failure, despite his best intentions, was a burden he carried. People often create unrealistic expectations, casting others in the role of miracle workers, Isabella observed softly. And when these expectations aren't met, the silent judgment they cast can be more wounding than any harsh words. Elizabeth nodded in agreement. Sasha was haunted by the condemning glances from grieving families, she reflected. It led him to find solace in alcohol, and he'd often say, "I've fallen apart." He was gently nudged out of his position, with an offer to resign as a gesture of respect for his previous achievements. Those 2 months were incredibly tough for both of them, with Michael aimlessly wandering and occasionally mingling with the city's lost souls. One evening he returned home battered and bruised, Elizabeth recounted, the memory still vivid. I pleaded with him to change his ways, but it seemed futile. Each time Michael left, Elizabeth was tormented by the fear that he might not return. The turning point came unexpectedly when Michael returned home one day, completely sober, offering Elizabeth a bunch of wildflowers as a pledge to abstain from alcohol. His encounter with a priest in a humble shop had been transformative. The priest had challenged him. "Is it really worth it? You drink to ease today's pain, but what of tomorrow? And the days after that?" Michael almost protested, thinking it wasn't the priest's concern. Yet, facing the priest's compassionate gaze, he found himself speechless. Together, they left for the church. "Speaking with the priest lifted my spirits immensely," Elizabeth recalled, her eyes glistening with emotion. The change in Michael was palpable that day. He never went back to his medical career, and soon after, I shared the joyful news of our growing family with him. Isabella was deeply moved by the story. "Your family is truly special." "Family means everything," Elizabeth affirmed solemnly, sensing Isabella's mood shift. She reassured her, "Things will work out for you too. Someone as radiant as you is bound for brighter days." "Hopefully," Isabella murmured wistfully. Time flew unnoticed, and it was already well past midnight. Despite the late hour, neither felt inclined to sleep. Elizabeth proposed a toast with some liqueur. "I'm not much of a drinker myself," she admitted, "but it feels right to celebrate this moment." After a delightful evening of conversation, as they prepared to retire for the night, Elizabeth gently requested, "Can we keep our conversation from tonight just between us?" "Absolutely. Your secret will remain with me," Isabella assured her. Upon waking, Isabella was greeted by Michael, who offered her a herbal-smelling concoction. "I whipped up something for you," he mentioned. "What's this?" inquired Isabella. "Nothing harmful, I assure you. It's a herbal brew meant to cleanse your system." "Thank you, I really appreciate it," she expressed her gratitude. To her surprise, the herbal remedy worked wonders. By the end of the day, she felt completely rejuvenated, as if the poisoning and unconsciousness had never occurred. The following day, donning Elizabeth's scarf and sunglasses for disguise, Isabella set out to visit her mother. Emily was astounded to see her daughter resorting to the sign of the cross in disbelief. "It seems this will be everyone's reaction upon seeing me," Isabella mused with a tinge of sadness. "But they held a funeral for you," Emily exclaimed in disbelief. "They conducted the ceremony, but I wasn't actually buried," Isabella explained with a melancholic smile, embracing her mother warmly. Over tea on the balcony, Isabella recounted her miraculous revival. Emily confided, "I was feeling unwell that day, unable to muster the strength to bid you farewell." Isabella responded understandingly, "It's unfortunate, or you would have immediately known I was still alive." "Let bygones be bygones," Emily said with a reassuring smile. "What matters is that you're here now." "So, you're staying with the priest?" "Yes, that's right. I wouldn't want to impose on his family, but I can't go home until I sort this out." "It might be dangerous," the daughter replied. "Maybe you should stay with me." "No, I think that would be unsafe too." Isabella shook her head. "After we sort everything out, we can escape to the Maldives, unless you have another destination in mind," Isabella suggested. "I just want everything to be okay with you," Emily responded with a sigh. "We'll work it out," Isabella reassured her. They continued their conversation for another hour before Isabella made her way back to the Thompsons. Though she was hesitant to leave, she knew she couldn't stay with her mother or other relatives until the situation was clearer, not wanting to risk their safety. "Farewell, Mom," she said, embracing her. "I hope we'll reunite soon." "If God wills it," Emily replied. Staying at a hotel was an option Isabella hadn't considered, and fortunately so. Unbeknownst to her, Elizabeth and Father Michael were destined to become pivotal figures in her life, both in the immediate and distant future. Staying with the Thompsons, Isabella was constantly touched by the warmth and genuine care within the household. Despite Elizabeth's encouraging words that things would turn out fine, Isabella harbored doubts. Determined to uncover the truth about her husband, Isabella resolved to keep her miraculous survival a secret for the time being. She pondered, how can I learn more about him without raising suspicion? What if he recognizes me? Elizabeth, with a twinkle in her eye, suggested, he might recognize you, but not me. Surprised, Isabella asked, you're considering meeting my husband? Elizabeth confidently answered, why not? A little adventure never hurt anyone. But how will we find out anything? Isabella fretted. Elizabeth excitedly proposed, I'll disguise myself as a FedEx courier and inquire with the doorman. It's a start. That's brilliant. We could even get a FedEx costume for Halloween, Isabella chimed in. Look at that, we already have a plan, Elizabeth noted with satisfaction. Disguised in a FedEx uniform, Elizabeth approached Michael's office building with a mix of anticipation and determination. She greeted the doorman, feigning a delivery urgency. I need to deliver something to Mr. Harrison, Michael Harrison, but I forgot my scanner in the van. Could you confirm if he's here today? It's quite urgent. The doorman, after a brief inspection, shared unexpected news. Mr. Harrison was arrested this morning. The police took him. Shocked, Elizabeth inquired, arrested? The doorman unwittingly revealed, yes, on suspicion of murdering his wife. The following day, Isabella Harrison made her way to the police station. The officer on duty was taken aback at the sight of her, struggling to find his words. But you, he faltered, unable to continue. Isabella empathized with the man's shock. Relax, I'm not a ghost. I'm here to clear up a big misunderstanding, she explained. She discovered that Alexander's arrest was based on an anonymously submitted audio recording. The recording captured a conversation between Alexander and his mistress, both of whom were now in custody, plotting to eliminate Isabella, the obstacle to their happiness. Isabella was exasperated by the complexity of the situation, realizing that even a real burial would have led to an exhumation for investigation. The situation presented multiple puzzles. Firstly, identifying who set up Alexander and his mistress, Victoria, and secondly, understanding the motive behind the attempt on Isabella's life. She was resolved to unravel these mysteries without delay. Concerned for her safety, Isabella pondered her next steps. Meanwhile, Alexander was unexpectedly released from custody. Confused by his sudden freedom, he questioned the reason, only to be rebuffed by a guard who speculated on how Alexander would cope with prison life. The moment Alexander was informed of his wife's survival, his reaction was one of sheer disbelief, drawing the attention of everyone present. Quietly, Isabella greeted him. Alexander. Overwhelmed, he exclaimed, Bella, you're alive. With a wry smile, she replied, clearly. His expression of relief was cut short by Isabella, who dismissed his theatrics, especially in front of the police, asserting, your relief is merely because you're off the hook as a suspect. Turning to the officers, she firmly stated, he's no longer under suspicion. Upon receiving a nod of agreement, Isabella took her husband's hand with determination and led him out. She mused over the dramatic turn of events as they approached the exit. Into the car now, she directed Alexander firmly. Puzzled, Alexander inquired, where to next? We'll start with home, Isabella replied nonchalantly, silently expressing gratitude to the priest for the use of his car. Once inside their apartment, Isabella headed straight for the bedroom without uttering a word, and began packing Alexander's belongings into the largest suitcase available. Puzzled, Alexander ventured, are we taking a trip? Isabella gave him a bewildered look. Is he serious? She wondered. No, you are going, not we, she clarified sharply. Did you really think we could continue living together after everything that's happened? I get it, Alexander conceded with a tone of resignation. Dropping to his knees, he began to weep, pleading for mercy. Bella, my love, my everything, please, I'm begging you to forgive me. Forgive, she echoed in disbelief. Are my ears deceiving me? I never actually went through with poisoning you, Alexander claimed, tears cascading down his cheeks, more for show than genuine remorse. I didn't even get the chance to tamper with your meal that day. Isabella couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity, but her amusement quickly faded as she sighed. At least you're being truthful now. Before he could continue, she cut him off. "It's time for you to leave." "But my love," he stammered, clearly shocked. "Are you not hearing me? Leave now." "Your belongings are packed. Expect a call from my attorney. You should understand the reason," she stated. "But where should I go?" he protested. "That's not my concern," Isabella replied coldly, turning her back on him decisively. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as she watched him leave, gone within minutes. Isabella then made herself some coffee and, with a cup in hand and her favorite chocolate cookies, retreated to the bedroom. As she sipped her coffee, she pondered the events of the night that changed everything. "Let's break it down," she thought to herself. Who else was there that night besides Alexander? The answer was clear. The housemaid, a detail Isabella had nearly overlooked. Sophie, the maid, had started working for them just 2 weeks before Isabella's funeral. Alexander had suggested bringing in a maid, citing their hectic lifestyles and the benefit of additional help around the house. Sophie was notably young, which had led Isabella to question the possibility of an affair with Alexander, though such concerns seemed irrelevant now. Yet the possibility lingered. Ultimately, Isabella deduced that Sophie must have been the one to spike her orange juice, given she had requested Sophie prepare it. The revelation of Alexander's illicit conversations and encounters in their home, captured on audio, pointed to Sophie's involvement. Isabella also pondered the motive behind Alexander's mistress recording the staged funeral. A detailed discussion with Sophie was imperative. Isabella felt confident that a conversation with Sophie would shed light on many unanswered questions. She recalled Alexander mentioning that Sophie had taken some time off to see a friend. This should be manageable, Isabella mused, hearing the key turn in the door. "Hi there," greeted Sophie cheerily, adding respectfully, "It's good to see you back among us." "Thanks," Isabella acknowledged with a nod before getting straight to the point. "Sophie, we need to have a talk." "Why not have a chat?" Sophie responded nonchalantly, and Isabella noted the maid's straightforward manner. But then again, if Isabella's suspicions were accurate, Sophie's directness was the least concerning trait. "I'll get straight to the point, Sophie," Isabella stated decisively. "You were the one who sent the recording to the police, weren't you?" "Oh, the one capturing Alexander and Vicky in their intimate moment, followed by their revealing discussion." Sophie responded with a hint of eagerness. "Did you find it impressive?" "Possibly," Isabella answered, her gaze icy. "And what do you plan to do about it?" Sophie asked with a hint of defiance. "Understanding the situation comes first. Then we'll see." "So what's your stake in all this?" Isabella inquired. "I'm actually your late father's unrecognized daughter," Sophie suddenly revealed. "Why the shock? Our father was quite the womanizer, had his flings, but he never acknowledged his extramarital children, including me. My mother passed away when I was 10. Do you know why? The stress was too much for her. She was working 3 jobs to keep us afloat." Sophie's voice wavered, her eyes filling with unshed tears, seemingly unnoticed by her. Isabella was taken aback by Sophie's claims about her father, struggling to accept them as truth. "Then I ended up in an orphanage which felt like paradise in comparison," Sophie went on. "In the orphanage, survival was key, yet it offered the stability of regular meals. It was there Sophie learned of her connection to Isabella, revealing a nervous smile as she shared, "It turns out we're sisters." "I discovered the truth just before finishing school. One of the staff confided in me about my parentage. I was filled with a desire for retribution against the sister who lived in luxury while I faced poverty and ridicule from peers for my worn-out clothes." Initially, Sophie contemplated petty acts of mischief against Isabella, like defacing her pristine car or the front door of her home. However, she quickly recognized that these minor acts were not only insignificant, but could also result in legal consequences, making them not worthwhile. Fueled by a desire for more significant retribution, Sophie thought, "Isabella has wealth. She should share." Despite this, Sophie knew deep down that Isabella wasn't to blame for their father's actions. A child isn't accountable for their parents' deeds. Yet with their father gone, Isabella remained, and Sophie felt compelled to seek what she believed was rightfully hers. The question was how to exact this revenge. Inspired by a movie where a protagonist becomes a maid in a wealthy household to seek vengeance, Sophie saw her path clear. Working closely within her home would offer ample opportunity. Sophie had to employ some creativity to secure employment with the Harrisons. She approached Alexander by a business center, appealing to his sympathies with her story. "I've come from afar and find myself without shelter," she explained. "Perhaps you're in need of a maid." After a brief consideration, Alexander consented, inadvertently hiring his wife's half-sister. Eventually, Sophie took drastic action, administering a potent poison to Isabella. Confronted by a bewildered Isabella who questioned her motives, Sophie responded nonchalantly, "What was my aim?" She mentioned consulting a lawyer who affirmed her entitlement to a portion of their father's estate. Isabella noted that everything depended on proving they were related. "The evidence will show up," Sophie declared. "All right, I've heard enough. Now I need you to leave," Isabella directed. With her scant possessions in tow, Sophie exited, leaving Isabella to grapple with the bombshell. Despite the gravity of Sophie's actions, Isabella found herself reluctant to involve the authorities, though it seemed the logical course of action. Ultimately, Isabella had to acknowledge her father's mistakes. After Sophie left, Isabella retreated to her room and threw herself onto the bed, her eyes landing on a photograph of her father. She had once held him in such high regard, only to discover he was no different from any other philanderer, having fathered a child outside his marriage. "Don't jump to conclusions," she reminded herself, realizing she didn't have the full story. She pondered how Sophie came to believe she was her father's daughter, based solely on what a caregiver at the orphanage had told her. But how reliable was that source? This warranted further investigation. Yet in choosing to release Sophie, Isabella unknowingly took a wrong step. Back in her plain apartment, Sophie sank into her poof, engulfed by a sense of defeat. She loathed her meager surroundings, questioning the injustice of her situation. Surrounded by second-hand furnishings and budget fixes, she resolved to claim her rightful share by any means necessary. Realizing she needed a partner in this endeavor, Sophie thought of the lawyer she had previously consulted, who had shown a certain interest in her. Perhaps he could be persuaded with a share of the compensation she planned to demand from Isabella for her years of neglect. Knowing she needed expert advice, Sophie reached out to the lawyer. "Have you got the DNA test results?" inquired the lawyer sharply. "Not yet, but—" "I don't operate on maybes," the lawyer cut in. "Plus, there's no telling if the test will even support your claim." "Sorry, but without solid proof I can't help you, so this is where we part ways." "Mighty guarantees he needs," Sophie muttered under her breath. Then a light bulb went off. "Vicky!" she exclaimed. "Of course!" Hurriedly, she reached for her phone. Without hesitation, Sophie contacted Alexander, who promptly provided Vicky's contact details. With the number in hand, Sophie didn't delay and made the call. "You have the nerve to ring me up again?" Vicky snapped. "Did you think I wouldn't figure out you were behind that anonymous tip to the cops? We're done here." "Just a second," Sophie persisted, not ready to throw in the towel. "Imagine what we could achieve together." "Buzz off." Vicky's rejection left Sophie seething. She couldn't accept defeat. "No way," she yelled. "No!" Her outcry was so loud she almost missed her phone ringing again. "Yes," she answered, trying to regain her composure. "What's your pitch?" It was Victoria on the other end of the phone. At the cafe where they'd agreed to meet, Sophie declared with conviction, "She needs to be out of the picture. It's either her or us." Her determined look sending a ripple of unease through Victoria. Surprisingly, Victoria wasn't completely opposed. "The issue is how we carry it out." Victoria's head spun suddenly and she felt sick. "Excuse me a moment," she said quickly, leaving the table. Upon returning, Sophie asked, "Are you all right?" "Not sure," Victoria replied, sipping some cold lemon water. "You didn't by any chance—" "Do what?" Victoria was confused. "Aren't you aware of the consequences when a man and a woman get together?" Sophie hinted with a smirk. "Oh, please, it doesn't matter to me, but it might just give us an edge." "Sophie." "Evident enough," Victoria responded. "Sophie, the question is, how do we use this to our advantage? Let's think this through together. Two minds are better than one." And they set to work on their scheme against Isabella. Earlier today at 10 p.m, a severe car crash was reported at the city's edge, as announced by the local news anchor. The accident involved well-known entrepreneur and philanthropist Isabella Harrison, who is now in critical condition at the Third City Hospital. The medical staff is giving their all to save her. The news anchor reported that the car crash was caused by brake failure and touched on Isabella's recent funeral before posing a poignant question: who stands to gain from the demise of a businesswoman? The police are delving into this mystery. Curse her, Victoria seethed, reaching out to Sophie. Did you catch the latest update? She queried her co-conspirator. Absolutely, Sophie responded, her tone dark. It's unbelievable. Does she have 9 lives or something? She must be a cat, joked Victoria. Doesn't matter. We've got the hospital's contact. Nothing's holding us back from finishing what we started. I've got a hunch we'll end up empty-handed if we don't make a move now. The broadcaster's optimistic update on Isabella's critical condition belied the grim reality. Post-accident, Isabella was left in a near-vegetative state, a month-long coma preceding her awakening to the realization that she was paralyzed. Would have been better to have died at first, she lamented. How can there be a 0% chance of genetic link? Sophie balked. This makes no sense. Ah, now I get it, she realized. You took money from her to change the test results, haven't you? Sophie accused. Our lab doesn't falsify results, the lab employee defended. Accusing someone falsely can lead to legal issues, so watch what you say. Sophie's reliance on the DNA test was met with utter disappointment. The last of her funds went into this pricey test, which she believed would soon justify the expense. Yet her hopes were dashed as her plans unraveled. Forgive me for the deception, Sophie. My intentions were only for your benefit. Julia Martinez, the caregiver who raised Sophie in the orphanage, sincerely apologized. Your sharp wit and cunning convinced me that hinting at a prosperous background could drive you to achieve more once you were out of the orphanage. Aware of the recent accident, Julia couldn't help but think Sophie's actions were driven by a desire for financial gain. Wealthy heritage? Sophie laughed bitterly. Is that the best you could come up with? I was trying to help, Julia said gently. Sophie's laughter intensified, taking on a menacing tone. Her laughter turned eerie, and without warning, Sophie's anger boiled over as she grabbed Julia by the collar, confronting her aggressively. Tell me, where's my wealth? Speak up, you creature. The caregiver managed to leave and, locking Sophie in the office, rushed to the medical worker. When a team of paramedics arrived to take Sophie to a psychiatric clinic, she grabbed a chair and threw it at one of them. The poor paramedic barely managed to dodge. Where's my wealth? Sophie shouted. Where did you hide it? Such a young soul, Father Michael mused as he met the newest patient. He visited the hospital from time to time, offering solace and occasionally conducting services for those in need. It was during one of these visits that Father Michael learned of Sophie's admission, just as he was preparing to leave. Meanwhile, Victoria, who had conspired with Sophie, displayed indifference upon learning that Sophie had been committed to a psychiatric ward. The only thing that had united them was their plot against Isabella. Once that failed, their alliance fell apart. Victoria, now pregnant with Alexander's child, was cognizant of his rearrest. She speculated that this time he might not find an escape. It turned out to be advantageous for her. The mistress was well aware that marriage was off the table, so she aimed to gain something from their relationship. Consulting with lawyer proved to be quite beneficial. To see Alexander, Victoria reached out to a past flame. Alexander appeared worse for wear, having thinned and with dark shadows under his eyes. Greetings, Victoria offered a smile. How have you been? Seen better days, he responded tersely. I've got some news. Did they find who messed with Isabella's car brakes? He inquired, somewhat disinterestedly. Or figure out the poisoning attempt? Any leads on the poisoning? Suspicions, yes, but solid proof is lacking, she answered, then turned the conversation to Victoria's reason for visiting. I'm expecting, she revealed, as you might have guessed. Really? He remarked with a hint of sarcasm, concerned I might be behind bars soon. I love you, Victoria professed. I'll do whatever it takes to free you, but you'll need to play your part. Which is? He asked. Authorize me to handle some of your finances for a while, she suggested calmly. What? Are you out of your mind? He balked. It's just temporary. Forget I asked, Victoria breezed on. Think about your situation and Isabella's condition. Covering Isabella's medical bills and legal fees actually benefits you, she pointed out. Alexander took a moment to consider her words. She had a point. Isabella required care, and he needed a top-notch lawyer with no one else to foot the bill. Victoria's offer suddenly didn't seem so unfavorable. Fine, I'll sign the power of attorney, he conceded. Consequently, the mistress acquired partial control over the Harrisons' assets, despite their ongoing legal marriage. She harbored an even more sinister scheme to seize their entire fortune, confident in her ability to deceive Alexander. However, Isabella remained a living obstacle to her plans. With shrewd legal maneuvers, she fabricated documents that named her Isabella's legal guardian, placing Isabella unwittingly under her control. Victoria's presence in the hospital became a constant, her visits masked by feigned concern and generosity. That endeared her to the staff, but not to Benjamin Brown. Benjamin, a medically trained professional turned nurse due to circumstance, was inherently skeptical of Victoria. His intuition whispered warnings he couldn't ignore, even as she charmed the rest of the hospital staff with her calculated kindness. Amidst these daily dynamics, Benjamin's interactions with Isabella evolved from professional to personal. Their conversations, rich with empathy and understanding, became the highlights of his days. Over time, Benjamin's admiration for Isabella's resilience and spirit deepened, transforming respect into affection. This gradual transformation was punctuated by moments of shared vulnerability and strength, leading Benjamin to a profound realization of love, not in an abrupt epiphany, but as a slow dawning of undeniable truth. Meanwhile, Victoria's facade of benevolence concealed a darker agenda. Her daily visits were not just to maintain appearances, but to closely monitor Isabella, waiting for the opportune moment to execute her sinister plan. On a critical evening, an unsettling feeling compelled Benjamin to rush to the hospital, a sense of urgency pulsing through his veins. Upon reaching Isabella's room, he was confronted with a terrifying tableau. Victoria, under the guise of Isabella's guardian, stood menacingly with a syringe in hand, its needle glistening ominously in the dim light, mere inches from Isabella's skin. In that razor-thin margin between action and consequence, Isabella's eyes fluttered open, her senses heightened by the imminent threat. With a gasp, she locked eyes with Victoria, recognition and terror mingling in her gaze. "Benjamin, it's her. Please help me. She's trying to kill me," she cried out, her voice filled with urgent fear. Victoria, momentarily paralyzed by Isabella's outcry, turned to flee, realizing her murderous plan was unraveling. But Benjamin's timely intervention thwarted her escape. He lunged forward, grappling with Victoria, knocking the syringe from her grasp just as it hovered dangerously close to Isabella's skin. The commotion attracted the attention of the hospital staff, and within moments, security officers swarmed the room. They detained Victoria, her sinister intentions laid bare for all to see, her plot to eliminate Isabella foiled by mere seconds. As Victoria was led away, the gravity of how close she had come to succeeding hung heavily in the air. Benjamin's instinctual dash to the hospital had been Isabella's saving grace, a fortuitous twist of fate that ensured her safety and marked the end of Victoria's devious schemes. Victoria's ambitions and deceitful ways eventually led her down a dark path. Driven by greed, she manipulated those around her to gain control and wealth, but her actions caught up with her. Arrested for her crimes, Victoria faced the harsh reality of prison life. Her situation took a dramatic turn when she gave birth to a baby girl within the confines of her cell. This poignant moment was marred by the heartbreak of knowing her daughter would be taken from her. True to her fears, the infant, untainted by her mother's deeds, was sent to an orphanage, severing the maternal bond by legal decree. Meanwhile, Alexander, entangled in his own web of troubles, met a grim fate. While serving time in prison for his misdeeds, a riot broke out one fateful night. Amid the chaos, Alexander sustained a fatal injury, marking a tragic end to his tumultuous life. Sophie, caught in a maelstrom of her own psychological struggles, remained in a psychiatric hospital, Her mental state, far from stabilizing, deteriorated further amidst the turmoil of the events unfolding outside. The news of Alexander's sudden death, compounded by the saga of Victoria's imprisonment and the birth of her child, exacerbated Sophie's fragile condition. With each passing day, her connection to reality frayed further, plunging her deeper into a maze of confusion and despair, isolated from the world beyond her hospital walls. In the aftermath, Benjamin and Father Michael became Isabella's steadfast supporters, encouraging her through the arduous journey of physiotherapy. Her progress, marked by the first steps with a cane, symbolized hope and resilience in the face of adversity. Reflecting on these tumultuous events, Benjamin found solace in Isabella's recovery and the promise of a shared future, their bond strengthened by trials and a deepened love that had grown over time, proving that true connection is forged not in moments of convenience, but through the shared experience of life's most challenging trials. In the soft glow of the evening, Benjamin turned the key in the lock, his heart light with the anticipation of home. The door swung open, and there, with the boundless energy of innocence, his 2-year-old daughter, Lily, stood on tiptoe. Her small hands barely reached the doorknob, but her bright eyes were full of recognition. "Daddy!" she squealed with delight, her voice a melody of joy. "Mommy, Daddy is home." Isabella appeared in the hallway, her smile like the first day of spring, warming everything in its path. She watched, her heart swelling with love, as Benjamin scooped Lily into his arms, peppering her face with kisses that elicited giggles and wriggles. In that moment, the house was filled with a happiness so profound that it seemed to erase the shadows of the past. Isabella joined them, wrapping her arms around her little family, a circle of warmth and love. As they relaxed in their cozy living room, Isabella remembered something her mother had said at her funeral, making her feel both happy and sad. "Isabella, you're gone too soon. I'll never meet your children." Looking at Lily, her eyes shining brightly, Isabella felt tears come to her eyes. But these were tears of happiness, not sadness. The room was filled with laughter and stories, with Benjamin and Isabella sharing tales of their day, weaving the simple moments into the tapestry of their family life. Lily, nestled between them, was a testament to their love, a symbol of hope and continuation.
If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and leaving a comment to show your support. Your engagement helps tremendously and encourages more stories like this one. Thank you for being a part of this journey.